Well, about 3 or 4 years ago, I decided to use this space, or make the space available for other painters and artists, in order to create a space where, instead of it being reliant upon curators, institutions, museum, or least of all the market, but actually set up a space that was where it was about peer group culture, or where it was practitioner culture, to actually give a space to the kind of work that either isn't commercially viable, or isn't necessarily on message or whatever. But I was asked a while ago about how I chose the work, and I mean, this is the key to the whole project, is I don't choose the work. I don't, because I'm not going to actually allow myself, or allow people the simple idea that that work is hung here because I like it. It's not the case at all. I don't dislike it or like it. I don't even like or dislike my own work. I don't think about it like that. Not because I'm high-minded, but because it's not very useful. It's a utilitarian, it's a pragmatic decision. But I make decisions based upon the people who I think need more airtime, more space, or I think work that I found fascinating, problematic, perplexing, and sometimes downright irritating, to actually share that with the group, as it were, yeah, or whoever.
Yeah, sure.
And that's meant it's become, or what has happened over those 4 or 5 years, is that the work is hopefully, I mean, I describe this as small parcels of very high protein sort of stuff. And it's not about, it eschews, and you know, I'm not engaged with the values of, I mean, I'm concerned with what it looks like, but probably more concerned with why it looks like it does, or why it's perplexing, or why it's frustrating. And so everyone in the show, I've chosen to work because I'm curious about what they do, I respect what they do, I don't necessarily like what they do, but it's work that I can't let go of. I think that's what happens. You quite often see things, and instead of saying, oh, I like that or I don't like that, can I go now? I'm one of those people who, things linger, they sort of cling, they remain unresolved.
Yeah.
And that leads me to think more about that work, think more about that person's practice, and it's their practice, it's their sort of, why they get up in the morning, sort of, you know, which puzzles me. And I think is that diversity, as it were, is something to celebrate. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a kind of, it's the diversity, but also the that sense of a discourse and curiosity.
Oh, curiosity is paramount.
That's really underlining everything, I think, a curiosity.
I'm curious as to why it exists, basically. Yeah. Anyway, this year's show has probably been one of the best, if not the best. It's also a place where practitioners, both painters, artists of all stripes, can actually meet each other and realise that this is the person they're following on Instagram or something, and that person does exist. Yeah, so lots of collaborations, friendships have started here. Yeah. But as I say, essentially it was to try and take back control, right? Not be kind of infantilised by institutions, not be patronised by a kind of fatuous sort of narrative which is driven by mainstream media. It's the antithesis to the notion of celebrity and capital and media. That sort of, what I would describe as a toxic triangle.
Yeah. The
interdependence of those, or equally problematic kind of conditions or parameters. Anyway, so ask me another question.
Well, I'm just thinking here about the piece to your right, which is Rosalind's piece, and you talked about relationships, but it's quite interesting because it's a piece that it comes from a series called the Gateway series, but it's also
number 24.
Number 24, and there's a relationship to your own work.
There is indeed.
There's a response or a dialogue going on.
There's also something more important than that. It's basically that I met Rosalind when she was a student, probably 20 plus years ago, right? She was at the Royal College when I was professor of painting, and I realised that, again, I made that judgment about her attitude, her approach. Not necessarily what she did at the time, but the fact that what she aspired to do, perhaps, was probably what I sensed. Anyway, over time, we collaborated. She employed me as a tutor or mentor or whatever it was during the Zeitgeist Arts Project, during the ZAC years, as it were, in New Cross. Well, we've been friends for 20 years, probably, yes. And anyway, but this piece, where to start? Well, basically, I think what's happened is, the Gateway series, if I understand it correctly, they're not something that will be sold, they're not out there, they're actually talismans, they're tokens of respect, of friendship. It's a bit like the spirit of the project, it's about sharing stuff. You know, if you've got the opportunity, then ideas like not just curiosity, but generosity and tolerance, things like that. I.e., that being an artist shouldn't necessarily make us celebrities or wealthier, but make us sort of, in my rather sort of straightforward ways, make us better people in some sense, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Because I firmly believe that, you know, this is about behaviour, it's about mental processes, you know, it's about the philosophy of mind, as Stephen Dunn put it so succinctly recently. And this piece, and the reason I'm talking about this piece separately is because the film I made prior with Bill Jackson, this piece hadn't arrived then. It came literally a few hours after we shut up shop. Anyway, first of all, if anybody knows my work, they know that the work at Domo Bars, the work I've been doing over the last few years, is a duotone. The combination is vitally important. All the paintings are painted with cadmium lemon ground, on a cadmium lemon ground, and then painted a la prima on a wet ground, painted into the medium, once that's dry of course, with Payne's grey. So you get this old school sort of graphic sort of quality.
Yeah.
There's a sort of a kind of, what is it, an economy of means. And that is something that Rosalind has reflected in her choice of materials and palette, and that is coupled with her preoccupation with architectural space, with the narratives that those spaces may reflect. But for me, it's the constant idea of that is, even though it is about the architectural or the built environment, or has architectonic qualities, it's actually still what shall we say, an elastic space. It's not constant. Every time I look at it or look back at it, I see it differently, right? And the idea that something that has geometric rigor, or is, you know, involves straight lines and rectangles and things, should be so visually elastic. It fascinates me constantly. And of course, things come forwards, things move backwards. There's no simple sort of warm and cool colour space solutions. It's actually all about sort of inference. There are little hints that this may be here or that may be there, and other times it's plain ambiguous. But the one thing that I wanted to make clear about this piece is it's not about vagary, it's not sort of just sort of random, right? There's something very, very well judged about the density, the opacity, and also the actual tone of the piece, from the rather sort of, what should we say, grey dominated spaces, which, like so much sort of, grey over lemons and yellows, tends to have a rather sort of unpleasant sort of green sort of tinge that sort of looks as if it's gone off a bit. There's something kind of unhealthy about it. And it's that kind of souring of that sort of, the idea of the lemons and the yellows and stuff, that I find fascinating. I mean, it fascinates me because my work is essentially, as I say, I paint shadows, so I'm fascinated by the idea of trying to embrace light. Yeah. And I think everybody knows what I think about that, and that was manifest in the painting at the Moors. Yeah. So anyway, this is it, Silent Disco. It's about sharing, it's about diversity, all of those sort of, you know, fine sort of ideas. but also I'm making judgments about, or trying to share, make public and give some acknowledgement to the idea of, what is it? Yes, acknowledgement of the idea that essentially I'm fascinated in why people do what they do. Particularly, and I'm not particularly, as I say, because I'm not interested in what I like or dislike, none of the work here looks like my work, and thank goodness for that.
No, it's fascinating because it's a kind of opportunity for the kind of, as you said, you talked about diversity, but this kind of breadth of work to come together in a room and conversation and discourse to happen, but people to meet and talk about the work.
Yeah, but also
it's very important.
It avoids the idea of a thematic umbrella.
Yeah.
Yeah, or one that can be declared. Because if there is an umbrella, it's about being. See, I'm one of those people who I was attracted to the art school because it represented a countercultural position.
Yeah.
Then, of course, like 30 or 40 years ago, with the rise of the YBAs and the general kind of what the events of that epoch, it moved into the mainstream, and it's not something. It's like my taste in music. I'm not particularly interested in mainstream culture.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a sort of it's like a prospector or a fossicker. It's called somebody who's foraging around in the margins, because that's in my DNA culturally.
Yeah.
To actually look for stuff that isn't necessarily widely understood, appreciated, or even experienced, and bringing that to the attention of a larger audience is about sharing, and it's an exciting thing. Whether people get it or whether they like it or not, it's not my concern.